Welcome to Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. On this podcast, my guest and I will discuss topics and ways to help us to heal in every area of our lives. I believe that everyone can live a life that is happy, healthy, and whole. So I'm on a mission to help people to deal, heal, and fulfill. Deal with your problem, heal from the pain, and fulfill your purpose. Thanks for tuning in. Let's get to it. Hey guys, real quick, before we jump into the episode, I need you to do the 3 S's for me. What is that? First of all, I need you to subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss an episode of our podcast. Number 2, I need you to share it with your family and friends. Don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone else. Lastly, I need you to say something. Leave us a comment. Let us know how we're doing. Let us know what you want to see from us, what you like, what you don't like. We are open to your suggestions. We want to know everything that you want to let us know about the podcast. All right. Now, get back to the episode. All right. Welcome to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. I am your host, Earnest James, and I believe everyone can and should live a life that is whole, healed, and healthy. And therefore, I'm on a mission to help people to deal, heal, and fulfill. So deal with your problems, to heal from the pain, and to fulfill your purpose. Thank you guys once again for tuning in to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. If you haven't already, make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube, to our podcast on YouTube and all of your podcast listening platforms. Make sure also you guys are checking us out on our YouTube channel, which is the Deal to Heal Podcasting Network. Again, that's the Deal to Heal Podcasting Network. Well, you will find the Girl Dad Discussions podcast, which is our sister podcast, as well as the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast, which you are listening to right now. There's also some other podcasts that's on the network and some more that's coming. So again, make sure you guys go to the Deal to Heal with E. James, the Deal to Heal Podcasting Network, and check us out there with our podcast and all of the other podcasts that we have that's there and those that are coming. Also, our podcast is brought to us by, or should I say, sponsored by our Deal to Heal School for Living community on the school platform. It is, again, to help us to further our mission to help people to deal, heal, and fulfill. To deal with their problems, to heal from the pain, and to fulfill their purpose. And we do that by offering on our school platform resources and workshops in order to help you to develop and to grow in the different areas of your life. So you can check that out. You can go in, and the first 7 days is absolutely free. You can sign up for the first 7 days and you don't have to pay anything. Check it out. See the workshops that we have. Even get some of the free resources that we have. You can even download the ebooks and things of that nature, all there. And after that, if you decide to stay, it's only $27 a month. And each month you get access to a new workshop. So again, that's the Deal to Heal School for Living. The link will be in the description, or you can just scan the QR code in our upper corner, and that will take you directly there so you can check it out. So again, that's the Deal to Heal School for Living, which our podcast is sponsored by. So make sure you guys check that out. But today, just like any other day, we are blessed with the guest, Miss Danniel. How you doing?
Good. How are you doing, Ernest?
I am good. First of all, let me say thank you for being here, because you could have been doing anything else with anyone else, but you are here with me and my listeners, and we definitely appreciate it. And we want to jump right into this thing. Daniel, do me a favor, introduce yourself to my audience. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do.
Absolutely. I'm Danniel Worthen Cullumber. I'm a mental health trauma therapist here in Utah. I'm the founder and owner of Willow Medalla Wellness. I created my practice to bridge the gap in holistic healing, as far as bridge the gap also in access to care that we may not always want to talk about, which is the unspoken paranormal to indigenous traditions and care. So I'm here excited to talk about healing. Thank you.
All right. All right, no problem. And that is our specialty, right? We that's why we're here to learn how to heal. And so, Danielle, do me a favor. So you told us a little bit about who you are and what you do, but let's go back to the earlier Danielle, because I always believe that there's a story before the story, right? There's a version of us of who we are, who we were, should I say, before we come to the person who we are now. And usually there's some kind of transformation that we've taken ourselves before we get into the space where we want to help others to transform. So who was the earlier Danielle, and kind of what was that thing that sparked in you, or that event that happened in your life that made you say, okay, you know what, I want to also help others to kind of get through and learn to heal in these different ways?
It's funny because I remember being in like elementary school, about third, fourth grade. I think it was fourth grade, and we were to draw ourselves in the future. And I actually drew myself as a doctor. I had the whole surgical cap on and everything. And I was thinking about being a pediatrician because in third grade, I had several surgeries. I had my
Mhm.
adenoids out. I had scar tissue that was infected, things like that. So doctors were helping me. And
Yeah.
while my peers were drawing themselves as singers and actors, I was to the doctor. And so I always wanted to help children and people in general, but I didn't realize that I had a learning disability for years that was undiagnosed. And when I got into college to start going towards that goal, I couldn't get it. I was understanding what my professors were saying, but when I was reading, I couldn't bridge that gap of why I was stalling. So I had to navigate an education system that was not made for me, and it turns out for many other people. So along the way, I learned hands on how to care for people. And then I went back and got the degrees to
Mhm.
support my lived experience. So
Mhm.
I became a recreational therapist. I also was a habilitational therapist. I trained to be a CNA. I also
Mhm.
became a social worker and now a mental health therapist. And I'm currently in my last 4 semesters of my doctorate program at Simmons University for my degree in social work.
I love it. I love it. Cool, cool. And I think that's interesting, because a lot of times, even as a young child, and it's funny because I don't think a lot of us even really recognize when we're saying we want to be these things. Like at a young age, we don't really have the experience to really say what we want to be. You know what I mean? It's like we're really just kind of going by what entertains us, should I say? And so, but in your case, and then even in other cases with uh, children or people that are having these different interactions with people that help them in their time of need, then those of us who kind of go through those examples, like, yeah, I want to be a helper. You know what I mean? Like I want to be a healer, because we've experienced those who have helped us to heal, and who have helped us in our time of need. So I love that. I wanna talk about, because you mentioned about, going through your the college and things of that nature, and kind of navigating those spaces that weren't really set up to help you, with the way that you needed. And so when we talk about turning pain into purpose, and you mentioned about starting your wellness company, how did that kind of transfer, of what was that thing that was like, you know what, this is my experience, and now let me kind of process it and box it up, should I say, to be able to offer to others, taking
Mhm.
your own pain into consideration of, now that I've experienced this, how can I help someone else with this same thing?
Well, one of the things I found was I'm undiagnosed ADHD for one,
Mm-hmm.
and neurodiverse brains. There's so many of us. I'm diagnosed dyslexia and dyscalculia as well, um, and my own children have the same similar diagnosis. I even have adult child with autism spectrum disorder.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was working through schooling and helping others, I was working with people with special needs, both physical and mental. And then I worked with geriatrics. So those limitations, I learned to adapt to make it more inclusive. As a recreational therapist, I was working with people who were at end of life or sick, and their depression was astounding because their freedom and their sense of purpose had disappeared. You're put in a
Yeah.
care facility, and stigma with that in itself is debilitating. So I learned hands on what that looked like for the individual, and also where I was saying, hey, if I didn't like that, why would they? And so I was like,
Mm.
where could I help? So in the process, I became a social worker. I did child welfare. I worked with people with special needs, as again, it consistently was working with those with mental health. And I was like, we can do more.
Mm.
And then also bringing in also the trauma. And that was the big thing, was with every story, there was a trauma story. And we, in that narrative, that wasn't a safe place for healing, let alone accessibility. And so I decided to create Willow Medela Wellness to bridge that gap. If I don't have the resource, I can refer you to somebody because I have been in the field and know what's been out there. And I'm also learning consistently what's new out there. So I'm always trying to educate and link services.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I myself worked with special needs persons for 10 years. And even now still is connected with a young lady, actually several people who are um, we do workshops and things like that for parents of children with autism. And we've done 3 conferences. I think this year will be our third one. I think how many we've done anyway. But I've been in the field of working with special needs persons for 10 years, and I know how, even like you said, you begin to notice the things that can be done differently. And I remember working with clients, and we had some clients who were um what's the I want to say it correctly. I can't think of the word that I want to say, but they have outbursts, right? They would have outbursts, and sometimes they would be physical outbursts, and a lot of people were afraid to work with them for that. But with me working with them one on one, what I realized, and I began to tell people whenever they came in contact with us, that they're normal people. They just can't
Yes.
verbalize what they feel. You know what I
Yep.
mean? And so the way that you treat them, they can't say you're treating me wrong. You know what I mean? They can't say, but they can feel it. So talk to them just like you talk to me. They may not be able to talk back the same way, but they can comprehend the same way. And so how I interacted with them, just like, hey, how you doing? Whatever, and play with them just like I would anyone else. You know what I'm saying? And that
Yeah.
way they had a different response to me.
What I think what happens with, and this is just a lens from my experience, I'm not saying generalizing with anybody else, is when we think there's a limitation, we almost want to automatically compensate for that individual. And I always, a lot of it's the education on that lens of how we approach it. It's like kind of like bringing to the table, like we bring a sentence of Joe, who's blind, plays basketball, but all you hear is Joe's blind, and the basketball is in the background. So if we change it, it goes, Joe, who plays basketball, is also blind. You're like, what? What? Is like, it just kind of emphasizes the emphasis of the individual, their power, their strength. And we also find that we don't mean to dehumanize them, individuals. And when we have trauma, that's the other thing that we're really not realizing, is we're dehumanizing ourselves. So if we're even doing that to somebody else, imagine what we're even doing 10 times fold to our individual being, because we actually talk more negative to ourselves. We stigmatize, we downplay, or put barriers up in our purpose as a human just to be able to do things. So when we see somebody else with something that we're not struggling with, we're not in their lens or their shoes, but we can imagine how, with our limitations individually, how that might appear. So there's that's it goes on to the education of how do we reframe that? How can we change that internal dialogue? Because if we change the internal dialogue, it actually helps those we're interacting with because we're showing up differently.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the exposure, when I think of the public, exposure is a big thing too, right? Just being
Yeah.
exposed. Because if you think years ago, hopefully many years ago, but years ago, when you had people with disabilities or different handicaps, they kind of hid them. You know what I
Oh
mean? And
yeah.
even the families that had loved ones who had different abilities, they would even keep them in the house and things like that. So over the years, it's been more, there's more inclusion. But I think there's still so much more to go, so that the normal public, or should I say just the public in general, are exposed more to people with with special needs, whether it be autism or whatever it is, that now because they are in uh, communication or in spaces where they're able to interact with them more, then they realize, the different ways that they're just regular people,
Yeah.
with some limitations. But I think with some people not being even, around uh, persons with special needs or any kind of, disability or things like that, they don't know how to react or know how to, communicate with them.
And you're right. And there's the other part is the visible part is the ones
Mhm.
that we can't see and assume. We cannot assume anybody's not struggling with a barrier, may be mental health to a autoimmune disease of
Mhm.
some kind.
Yeah.
And when we actually respect an individual's autonomy to say, hey, I need help, or please allow me to do it myself,
Mhm.
we can actually do more for ourselves by observing that autonomy for the other person, because then we actually have more of a safe for ourselves as well. Because I mean, I don't know about you, but anytime we've been put in a situation where we need support, we don't want that support because
Right.
we are pull the stereotype, pull ourselves up by the bootstraps. We push through, but the hardest crippling part is actually what you're doing is not accepting the help or acknowledging that there could be access to resources, or those even people who say you can't access that resource because I don't see what I deem necessary for that resource.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
and that is another trauma. So it keeps going back to this
Mhm.
narrative, this trauma, this cycling, this repeated behavior of we keep hurting ourselves because we can't stop and go pause. Wait, what can be done? And also, where can the healing start in that narrative and those behaviors or those situations?
Yeah, yeah. And one of the I always say, with everything that we're dealing with, like we always have to start with self, right?
Yes.
Because first of all, self is the only person we can control, and only thing that we can control is how we react to different things that we're exposed to. So we have to start with ourselves first, right? And then when we become better ourselves, then we kind of learn how to even handle or help others because we've looking at ourselves of the things that we went through, right? And so one of the things that you just mentioned, even when um, people wanting to or needing some type of assistance or help, but not wanting it, and so I work in construction, right? And so there it's a male dominated field. We do have some young ladies that work with us, but it's a male dominated field. And sometimes even in that, there are things that, as men, we need help with or may not be able to do and don't want to accept that help, or on the flip side of it, what I've found is that I have to be careful because I'm a helper, right? And I'm always trying to assist,
Yeah.
but I'm not allowing you to do it yourself for what you can do, right? So when we're
Yeah.
talking about persons with limitations, there's a one guy who had a stroke. So his one arm was not as strong as the other arm. And so when I started working with him, just on the job, I had to be mindful of myself, like, don't do his job for him, because I don't want him to feel demasculated, like, let him do what he can do. And if he needs help, then I'll assist him. And if he asks for help, then I definitely assist him. But don't just take it upon myself, like, let me do it for you. You know what I mean? Because, like,
Yeah.
no, you gotta, you know what I'm saying? And finding that balance, you know what I'm saying?
And that's where we need to start have that communication. And the problem with communication itself is we're not taught how to communicate our needs, our wants, our desires, or with each other. When I talk to people and they go, I need help with communication, I'm like, don't we all? And
Yeah.
and for somebody, I was actually had to do speech therapy in grade school. So I actually had to learn how to talk, and I still sometimes have to pause, and I do mumble, but that was never a barrier in the essence that communication is not just a two-way street. We need to know, are we talking at each other versus with each other? And so even if we're talking, like you and I, we're talking with each other, but so quickly one of us could actually go just talking at each other, and we stop listening, we stop engaging. And that's actually the other part is we're like, you're not listening to me, or you're not telling me what I need to hear. We need to start a pause and go, okay, what do we know? Start from that footing, same space, and then we can communicate. Like your coworker, your construction worker, just have that conversation of going, hey, I can see there's something there, but I don't know where your strengths are and your limitations are, or would you like support with? Could you at least articulate what that is at this time, so I can actually better support you, but also you can support me, so I'm not assuming things and misstepping. And then there's that respect, and that dialogue's happening, and then that healing actually happens because people haven't done that for them or with them before, probably. And that's an internal healing for yourself, going, I'm actually going, wait, when I'm hearing that, I'm also looking at what I can and can't do, and expecting those boundaries and that self-reflection as well.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Um, so one of the things, and speaking of the self reflection, one of the things that you talk about is the power of that intuition and that self compassion for yourself, right?
Yeah.
One of the things that I do, amongst many things, I am one of the facilitators of a workshop called the Forgiveness Workshop, right? And we talk about everything surrounding forgiveness. And my specific topic that I talk about on that workshop is self-forgiveness, and learning to forgive yourself for some of the things that you've done in the past and that you may still be holding on, in your present. And so when we're talking about, just having that self-compassion for ourselves, what are some of the things that we can look for and even begin to acknowledge within ourselves that, what, let me show myself some grace, and with this specific thing?
One of the things I come across is that we as humans, we don't have a healthy role model from birth on. We're learning through our environment, okay?
Yeah.
And I was like, what is a healthy attachment? What is a healthy relationship? What is all those things? Well, we can learn about how we show up for ourselves and how we engage with others. But the biggest thing I encourage people to do is learn to do an observation. Because if you're doing an observation, it helps us pull us out of our flight or freeze mode and pulls us in our executive function. I call it the boss brain, because we get it be in charge with the information. And with the observation, we get more awareness of what's really going on, instead of when we're in anger or when we're in anxiety or when we're in depression, that lens closes down, especially when we're feeling attacked or we're questioning our insecurity and our security in a situation. If we can pause and do an observation of what's really going on, then we can observe how we're showing up in ourselves, and it stops that dialogue just a moment enough so we can reset.
Yeah.
And that allows us to also then see if that aligns with us, if that's really the truth that we're seeing or what we're telling ourselves. um, Another thing too about the intuition is
Mhm.
you know yourself better than everybody else.
Yeah.
One of the things I ask my clients, because I am a trauma therapist, is I will tell you what to do, but I will always ask you. But that being said, please tell me from your lens what you're going through. If I have a question, I'll ask. Because so many of us will, let me tell you this way. It's almost like we have to prove ourselves even when we're trying to explain ourselves. It's almost like we're trying to prove to ourselves. It's like we're talking to the person, but we're trying to tell ourselves that we're believing this statement as well. So do that observation. Go, how am I understanding it through my lens, and see where I have those blind spots. And don't judge blind spots because you're not held accountable to them,
Mhm.
because you couldn't see them in the first place.
Mhm.
Unless it's a car, that's a different consideration. That's just throwing a little humor out there. But once we become aware of the blind spot, then we get to once again do that observation, and then you get to do any of use the information if you want to or not. Leave it, doesn't matter. It gives you choice. That's the thing about when we're in trauma or when we're hurting, we don't feel that we have choice and that autonomy. So observation gives us access to that ability to feel that we actually can move, stay,
Mhm.
or shift.
Yeah, yeah. And I think when one of the things that a lot of us struggle with, again, like you said, none of us have that perfect role model. We're just kind of all of us kind of learning on the fly. Um, but I think one of the a big thing that we all kind of struggle with, and some level, is that emotional intelligence. You know, really
Mhm.
being in touch with our emotions and how we act and how we react as well. You know what I mean? And I think that's a big thing, especially having had trauma or having gone through some trauma. You know, it's like, all right, I react to it this way every time. But like, but why? You know what I mean? Why are you reacting that way? And is that the appropriate reaction? You know what I mean? Like if you take time to process it, like how do I feel about it? What does this thing actually make me feel? And then be able to process it enough where you can be able to recognize, okay, am I reacting in the right emotion with this thing? Am I always getting angry for something that's triggered me that really was nothing for me to get angry about,
Right.
or and all of those things. But I think that emotional intelligence is like a high priority that we have to kind of get in touch with ourselves as well.
With emotional intelligence, I love that, because with the observation, that
Hmm.
allows us to step back and go, allow us the moment to have compassion for ourselves
Yeah.
and not necessarily just judge and shame things. Um, a tool that I learned, I got access to this like years ago, but I wish I had it in my childhood. I really wished I had this. It's a resource from therapistaid.com. They had a green flag and a red flag on what is forgiveness. And I'll use this with people when they're trying to like work through forgiveness issues with other people. But I go, let's reframe that and go with the relationship with ourselves. If we can start working on our observation with the relationship with ourselves, the relationships with everybody else start to shift naturally. It's not
Hmm.
forced. It starts do a thing where it aligns to what we want and desire. I mean, and it just breaks it down. With neurodiverse brains, we almost need to have it black and white. So I love it's that it's green and red, because
Yeah.
it's like this is what it is. This is not what it's not. And everything we learned from somebody else who learned it from somebody else, and it got
Mhm.
distorted and diluted and shifted. So it's like some of us just really need it kind of spelled out for us. And once we see that, I go, okay, now you have that information. Do that observation and observe how people with their communication, are they talking at each other or with each other? And then because you're recognizing it, you see it in yourself, but then you don't have to judge it, because you're like, oh, now I can see how that works. We now have to kind of shift into it
Mhm.
because we had that reference now.
Yeah, I
If
love it.
we
I love it.
we shift without having to force it, which is when you force something, it's another trauma. So let's kind of step back from kind of force the round hole in the peg, that saying.
Yeah. I got you. I got you. Yeah, and one of the things, so with when I'm talking about on the forgiveness side, because I use self talking about self forgiveness, but I use self the word self as an acronym, right?
Mm.
And it stands for season of life, emotional state, limited information, and forgiveness by grace, right? And so what I have the our people do when I'm thinking about whatever this thing is that you're holding against yourself, ask yourself when you made that decision or you did that action, whatever that was, what season of life were you in? You know what I mean? Because we go through seasons. Then, after you look at it from the season of life, what emotional state were you in? Because sometimes, we're going through grief after losing someone, the L stands for limited information. What information did you have when you made that choice? You may not have had all the information. And then the F will be taking in consideration of those first three, and then give yourself forgiveness by grace. And one of the things that I also learned as I was teaching this was that, and I began to tell people too, like you said, starting with self, and once you walk yourself through the acronym, when someone else offends you, look at them through that same lens. What season of life are they in? What emotional state are they in? And then you begin to, because like you said, you've looked at yourself through that lens. Now, when you look at others through that lens, you can get to that F and give them forgiveness by grace as well, because now you see the humanity in them, just like you've seen it in yourself.
I love that acronym. It goes back to when I interact with people and they're like, I can't believe I waited this long. Why couldn't I do it before? And I go, it goes back to going, maybe you can't be held yourself accountable. You probably wanted it, but you didn't have the education. Maybe you weren't
Mhm.
in that place where you could do it, or the supports. You can't, don't shame that you're now doing it now when you could have used it then, because that is a season.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes.
it, and also, I also look at the whole person. Like when I go, have you been sick lately? Yes. Have you been in pain? Yes. Well, that's going to affect this. It's going to affect that. It's
Mhm.
going to, our body in our existence in an ecosystem. And when one is off, it's going to affect the others. I'll have people in grief and they're like, I can't remember things. I'm like, absolutely, you're not going to remember things. Our bodies are geared to thrive and survive, and they're going to turn off what's not necessary. And if you're on
Mhm.
autopilot and just trying to get through the day to day, those short-term memories is going to be lost, or the things that you normally know by heart, you're like, why can't I remember where it is? It's because it's trying to keep you sustainable right now.
Yeah.
Don't shame yourself for not being able to be at capacity, especially when we've been on autopilot for so long. Like, I'm going to use first responders, for example, or
Mhm.
teachers. I mean, they're always at a high level, and they come home and they sit down on the couch and they go, "Ugh," they can't do anything. It's not lack of motivation, is that
Yeah.
our adrenalines are going on consistently, and because we've been doing it so long, it's become normalized. And
Yeah.
when we have an on switch, but we don't have an off switch, and we need support through coping skills, coping strategies, routines for maintenance to help us decompress those things, so then we can go into recovery mode, and then we can show up better for ourselves and for other people. Just like they say, put your oxygen down mask
Yeah.
before you help somebody else,
Mhm.
including the child, because if you're down, everyone goes. And
Mhm.
we were talking about special needs. We don't ever talk about the caregivers. They're the ones that actually
Mhm.
die before the person that they're caring for dies or passes, because they don't have the capacity to take care of themselves because they're taking care of everybody else or that individual.
Yeah.
Caregivers, people of support, are deteriorating faster. And if you're a parent, and let's use generational parents, like you're taking care of your kids, but you're also sandwiched because you're taking care of your your parents who maybe deteriorate health. That's a double whammo.
Mm-hmm.
So we got to go back into going, it's not just trauma, it's this ongoing day to day that facilitates the healing or taking from us. And we don't want to, shouldn't shame ourselves if we couldn't get to getting the laundry done or folded. To,
Yeah.
I'm lucky that my kid got fed. It may not be nutrition, but they're happy, they're
Yeah.
clothed, they're safe, and that goes back to safety too. Are
Yeah.
we feeling safe in what we're doing with ourselves and with others? What's
Yeah.
that safety look like? Because if you're in crisis mode or that anxiety, do you even know what safety is for yourself? Is it even safe to take a compliment or take a pause, to even do a self-care day for even an hour? That's a
Yeah.
conversation we need to have with ourselves and maybe our partners or our friends or communities, if possible.
Yeah, yeah, and you're definitely right. I actually was having a conversation earlier this week. I mentioned at the beginning that I work with a young lady who we do the conferences for the parents with children with autism, and that was one of the things that we actually talked about was creating a space for the parents to just have a break. You know what I mean? Like even whether it's just to sit in the room in silence and not have to do nothing, like just
Oh,
that itself, it's silence. And I think silence is so overlooked in our lives today because we're constantly being bombarded with our phone and
the
things on our phone
stimuli
and
that
music and
just, oh
whatever.
yeah,
It's like just to be able to sit in silence, right, and just give your body and your senses a moment to just decompress. You know what I mean? Like I ain't got to be like trying to figure things out. Just breathe. And I think that is so important. But yes, so that was one of the things we were talking about for our next uh, conference that we have was doing something not only to give parents information, but also figuring something out where we can give them just a time period, even if it's just for an hour, just to do nothing. You know what I mean? Just have that. So
and
yes,
it's
that I
almost
think
scary
that's
to
so
be in
important.
silence because they're like, if it's silence, like something's happening. It's like it's a trigger response almost because we conditioned ourselves to being like it's not safe to be in that void. Please put me in that void because I need to decompress. It's like we don't know that we need it until it's forced upon us,
Mhm.
which doesn't isn't safe in itself because once again I said forcing something's kind of traumatic. So when
Yeah.
all of a sudden you're stuck going, I have no choice, then you're forced to reassess. The most interesting thing I've had to learn in my process as a therapist, as a social worker, for as a caregiver,
Mhm.
people are not willing to change unless for two reasons. One, a crisis happens and they can't do it anymore, or something forces them and they have no choice to move. It's usually
Mhm.
something there, and it's usually outside themselves that's out of that control. And they're like, I can't do this anymore. We're going to have to do it. And the sad thing is, we're in fear. And we know the acronym FEAR stands for false reality appearing real, right?
Mhm.
Well, that fear is, as humans, we are creatures of habit. We'll stay in our suck of muck even when we know it's not good for us. And that's not to shame it because that's familiar, that the expectation, we know how to navigate that. That could be from
Yeah.
being in a domestic violence situation to an abusive relationship to ongoing uh, bullying, things like that. It's like, I can navigate this. It's not good. I'm scared. I want to get away from it, but at least I know what to expect versus going through
Mhm.
that door and going, what's on the other side? And that
Yeah.
crisis kind of pushes us into that unknown. And that's
Yeah.
why we seek support is because like, okay, I need to find somebody that can at least give me a direction because that's where we're at.
Yeah, yeah. Before we get out of the last thing I want to talk about, Danielle, because in your practice, you mentioned about going to college, and I know we talked a little bit off air about some of the things that you do. But one of the things is that you try to merge like science and spirituality and mental health all together to kind of
Yeah.
to create this service, should I say, that kind of meets the need, however it is. So tell us a little bit about your approach to help and the way that you do that, and why did you feel that it was important to try to put all of those things together?
Well, first of all, a lot of us have existential questions for ourselves, but some
Mhm.
of us have extra gifts. And that could be, even if you are a skeptic or anything, we all have special gifts. Maybe savants with ability to play music to painting. But there's some people that actually uh, can hear things like the spirituality part, not religion. We're talking about the spirituality
Mhm.
part of themselves. They connect with their ancestors. Maybe they talk to somebody that's passed over, or maybe I don't know. They believe in aliens. It does no judging on any of that. The judging is when we stop ourselves from having a voice to it.
Mhm.
And we don't feel that we have a safe place to go because that stigma of the label. And I created Willow Medela Wellness where that need can be met without worrying about, I can diagnose, but you're not going to be diagnosed with a schizophrenia because you're hearing voices or hearing things. I want to hear your lens because your belief in your practices is part of you. And we're decolonizing that narrative because we know that we're told you can't do this XYZ because it doesn't fit a box. And we are not boxes.
Right.
We are human beings having experiences that may be spiritual. And I wanted to allow the person to tell me that their family member is a witch, or their family member is a nun or priest and they had their experiences. It doesn't matter. But I'm also a paranormal investigator, so I am about science. But I also want to know the unknown that is unexplained. And I've had a lot of experiences where people were traumatized because they couldn't find a safe space to have the stories, or even process their grief that their loved one came to talk to them in a dream. I have
Mhm.
knowledge on how to do treatment, but when it comes down to it, the person is the expert of what they're needing. And I want to be able to offer that them without that judgment, without me just throwing a stamp down and going, oh, you need XYZ pills because this is what
Mhm.
you're not functioning. Well, maybe they're functioning just fine. They just want to be able to be heard. And that goes back to
Right.
that communication and safe space.
Yeah, I love it, and I that has been so the right to be heard and the chance to be heard has been so instrumental in you know in my life, should I say, because one of the things I always say is I want to be a sanctuary, right? I want to be a
Mhm.
safe space for people, and with that being my desire, I always end up having conversations with different people and just what's going on. Like we may start off with a general conversation, but it always seems to go into something they may be dealing with or something that you're feeling or experiencing. And I just offer that listening ear, and a lot of times just giving a person a chance to speak without interruption, without judgment, without trying to fix it. You know what I mean? Just being able to give them a listening ear and just to be like, I hear you. It's so instrumental. It has been so instrumental, even in my life and the people that I come in contact with, just by giving them that space to just listen to them. And I think that that is so important. And a lot of times, like you said, not trying to fix it and be like, oh, you must be this because you think this way, or you might be schizophrenic, or you might be crazy or whatever because you think differently than I do. You don't fit in my box or whatever. But no, just giving them a chance to say, this is how I feel, this is what I'm dealing with, and just to sometimes just to get things off their chest.
Yeah.
I think it's such a is monumental, especially in this day and time that we live in, because again, we're always being bombarded with others people's influence and other people's ideas, and social media and television and whatever, and ads, and telling you, hey, you like this, and I was thinking about those those commercials for medication, and be like, if you have these symptoms, and they literally list like everything you could ever have. And it's like, of course, like, what I mean? Do you have a finger? Oh, well, you must, you know what I'm saying? It's like, yes, it lists so many things that by the time they get done listening, they basically listed every option. You know what I mean? They're like, oh, well, you must have it, but I think that, again, we have give people a chance to be able to speak their mind and just speak their truth, and how they feel and how they're dealing with things, and just be that listening ear. I think, again, has been very is and has been very monumental in this time frame that I in my life at least.
Yeah. And that's the thing is finding more people are opening up to their gifts. Some people are identifying as spiritual, maybe psychic, medium, clairvoyant, and or even talking to the elements. And I mean, indigenous people have been talking to their guides and spirit beings and animals for years. People in India talk about reincarnation and Hindu, and we also have hoodoo and voodoo, and there's never a safe space to have a voice within accepting their community, but yet they can't feel safe to have a voice in their community because they may have a different lens on something or a take or experience. I have people who've had paranormal experiences since childhood about ghosts and stuff, and like I've been hearing things and seeing things. Like, well, let's talk about it. What happened? And come to find out, not just that, they had other traumas as well, and they are intersecting and making their lived experience more difficult. And all they just want to know is it's safe to be heard without that judgment and being said, it's all in your imagination. This isn't real. Or take that medication. Now, pharmaceutical has a place, but it's not a cure. Plant-based medicine, it has its place. It's not doesn't cover everything. So when we look at ourselves, we have to look at the ecosystem that you're working with and what aligns with you. And your voice needs to be heard in that communication. And that's what me, as Danniel Worthen Cullumber, as a trauma therapist who calls herself a holistic therapist that offers that Willow Medela wellness. And that's what I'm trying to bridge that gap with. And yes, I have the education to back it up, but I also have the lived experience to say, I see where you're at.
Yeah, and I think that lived experience a lot of times outweighs everything else. Like, you can't tell me that this doesn't work or this isn't effective because I've lived through it. So I think that is probably more valuable a lot of times than our education or our schooling or whatever. Like, yeah, but
exactly.
what you say this book says, but I know what I lived through and I know what I've experienced. So
I can guarantee you that the textbook says one thing, they're basing off somebody else's lived experience, and that's just a small percentage. It doesn't complete the whole. It doesn't explain everybody. And just because I have tools does not, as I said, make me the expert. Yeah, I'm an expert in things, but you are the expert of your lived reality. And I have tools that I can connect you with that may help you, and that's the goal.
Yes, I love it. Danniel, I really appreciate having you on and share your story and expertise.
Thank
I
you.
want you to have the last word. I want you to leave us with a word of advice, motivation, however you feel, right? And also with your social media handles, or where we can find you, in order that if we want to reach out to you to work with you and things of that nature. So I'll give you a couple seconds to think about that. To my audience, thank you guys once again for tuning in to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. Make sure you guys are checking us out on our official website, which is dealhealfulfill.org. Again, that's dealhealfulfill.org. Make sure you guys are checking us out there. Also, make sure you guys check out my website, my speaker's website, which is earnestjamesspeakslife.com, in order to find more information about me personally, to have me come out to be a speaker or to facilitate a workshop at your school or organization. Again, that's earnestjamesspeakslife.com. dealtoheal.com. And also, again, make sure you're checking us out on our official website, which is dealhealfulfill.org. I talked earlier about the ebooks that we had available at ebooksbyejames.com, but probably by the time that you are watching this, that website does not exist. However, you still can get access to the ebooks, but actually you can get them access to them absolutely free by going to our Deal to Heal School for Living. Again, checking that out for those first 7 days, absolutely free, and then stay if you decide to. But once you register and you get in there, you can go to the resources tab, and there we have a lot of free resources, including our ebooks, so you can get our ebooks for absolutely free. So again, the link to check out the school, our school environment, or school community, should I say, will be in the descriptions, or you can just scan the QR code in the corner. Also, dealtohealtees.com, which are inspirational t-shirt line. Put some inspiration in your situation. Wear an inspirational tee and be inspired all day. That is our tagline. Check out our inspirational tees that we have there. That's deal, the number 2, healtees.com, deal2healtees.com. And there's also our podcast merch, which is our t-shirts with our podcast logos on it. There's one for the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast, as well as one for the Girl Dad Discussions podcast. So make sure you guys go there and check that out. Also, I talked about it a little bit earlier. I've been blessed to be a part of an organization called the Forgiveness Mission. And one of the things that we do, we have free virtual workshops bi-monthly, speaking on the things of forgiveness of self, forgiveness of others, forgiveness of the world, even forgiveness and wellness, and how forgiveness or holding unforgiveness affects our bodies. So you guys can sign up for our next free virtual workshop by going to forgivenessmission.com. Whenever you're listening to this, either a workshop just passed or there's one coming up. So again, that's forgivenessmission.com. The workshop is absolutely free, but the information is priceless. So make sure that you guys go and check that out. Last but not least, I am pleased to announce that we have now started our Deal to Heal the World Incorporated, which is our nonprofit arm of the work that we do, because we want to be able to do more in our community, and we don't want to have to charge for those things. So we want to be able to be a resource to the community and supply more resources to our community. So we started our nonprofit. Again, it's called Deal to Heal the World Incorporated. So make sure you guys go into the descriptions to find that link where you can make a donation to help us bring more healing and help to our communities for free of charge for the community, but we can only do it with your help. So make sure that you guys are checking us out there. Again, all of that information will be in the description under this podcast, whether you're watching it on YouTube or whether you're listening to it on your podcast listening platform. So make sure that you check that out. Again, Danniel, I want to say thank you so very much for being on. Thank you for sharing your story and your expertise. I want you to have the last word. So the floor is yours.
Thank you again for having me. Healing doesn't have to be isolating. It could be a companionship and a unity of safe place. So come talk to me, Danniel Worthen Cullumber at Willa Medella Wellness. You can find me at www.willamedellawellness.com. And you can email me at info@willamedellawellness.com as well. And my WhatsApp number is 801-906-3802. Send me a message, drop me a line. I love to chat. Healing doesn't have to be done alone. Thank you.
All right. We can't end it no better than that. To my listeners, thank you once again for tuning in to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast, where our mission is to help you to deal, heal, and fulfill, to deal with your problems, to heal from the pain, and to fulfill your purpose. Until next time, you guys be blessed. Thanks for listening to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. Remember to listen, like, subscribe, and share. This episode has been brought to you by Deal to Heal Tees. Put some inspiration in your situation Wear an inspirational tee and be inspired all day. Let's go to dealtohealtees.myshopify.com. Remember, our mission is to help you to deal, heal, and fulfill. Deal with your problem, heal from the pain, and fulfill your purpose. Thanks for listening.